Welcome back to the Junkyard News.
This video was intended to inform and educate the public.
In today's news story, we have an incident that happened in Mississippi that we're going to cover, where a former Mississippi police officer was arrested after running from his Blue Line brothers, reaching speeds over 100 miles an hour in an attempt to evade capture for the slaying of a nurse whose family says had a restraining order against this officer.
The former Jackson police officer charged with the murder of a local nurse. Marcus Johnson is accused of shooting and killing 25-year-old Carlos Collins inside his North Jackson apartment.
Now, a source close to the investigation does confirm to news agencies that Carlos Collins, 25, was fatally shot and struck to death with a blunt object, later described to be an axe or a hatchet. Now, when a warrant was issued for this officer's arrest, the former Jackson cop wanted for the murder was eventually taken into custody after the chase began. The high-speed chase that began on Interstate 20 in Vicksburg ended in Louisiana with the arrest of a former Jackson police officer wanted for murder. Warren County Sheriff Martin Pace said a Warren County Sheriff's deputy called in the first sighting of the suspect, kicking off a pursuit that included multiple law enforcement agencies across both states. Now, that afternoon, the Jackson Police Department had put out a bulletin to be on the lookout for a black Honda Accord possibly occupied by a Marcus Johnson, who was wanted for murder in Jackson. Then, Warren County Deputy Dusty Keys spotted the vehicle. He was joined almost immediately by the Vicksburg police officers and a Mississippi Highway Patrol trooper. Now, sources say that the suspect refused to yield to his Blue Line brothers and continued to run from law enforcement and entered into Louisiana. As they attempted to stop the vehicle just past the Halls Ferry exit, the vehicle sped up, crossed into Louisiana, and continued at speeds approaching 100 miles per hour in an attempt to flee. Now, eventually, the officers used spike strips. It took 2 attempts. First attempt failed. Second attempt, they got 3 out of 4 tires, and eventually the vehicle came to a stop, and the former officer did surrender. Now, you may be thinking, okay, what's this background? What's the story behind this? Well, let's get into it. Now, the victim, Carlos Collins, had walked at one time into a police precinct in Jackson, Mississippi, multiple times in the past few months, telling officers that he believed his ex-boyfriend was stalking him, according to his family. Collins also filed a restraining order against this officer, said the sister of Collins. Now, it's claimed that Collins also filed a restraining order against this officer. Collins' sister, Alisha Hudson, tells news agencies, but his ex-boyfriend, Marcus Johnson, was a former Jackson police officer, and the stalking-like behavior continued. And according to the family, his Blue Line brothers paid it no mind. They complained that this officer was violating on numerous occasions the restraining order against them. At one time, when the victim had gone out to dinner, all of a sudden they realized, boop, he was sitting in the table all of a sudden right behind them. Restraining order, it's just a piece of paper. My Blue Line brothers ain't gonna do jack. And they were right. The victim's sister said that her brother's last months he was living in hell dealing with Marcus. And the Jackson Police Department mishandled this case and downplayed the situation. They didn't care to protect my brother, but they in fact protected Marcus, their Blue Line brother. April 9th, Jackson police responded to a violent scene at Collins' apartment, where unfortunately the 25-year-old was found deceased, shot multiple times, and hit with a blunt object. Again, once the warrant was put out, because after reviewing Ring doorbell video at the time of the incident occurred, detectives figured out, okay, we have a suspect. And they put out a APB and got a warrant for his arrest that all precluded to the before mentioned chase. Pursuing Johnson in a car chase across state lines, police arrested the 33-year-old on April 10th in Monroe, Louisiana, on charges of murder and shooting into an occupied dwelling in connection to Collins' killing. Now, the two had dated for about a year, ending late 2023. In the months that followed the breakup, Collins found air tags and trackers on his car and the vehicles of friends as well. And at least at one occasion, the victim's sister claims that her brother had told her that he had awakened to see Johnson watching him sleep. Now, the victim's sister claims that he told her in a conversation, "This guy is obsessed," she recalls, saying of his ex, before handing her his phone with Ring camera footage that she claims depicted Johnson pacing outside his apartment. Now, it's claimed that Johnson, the suspect, had been employed with Jackson Police Force for about 8 months, and the police said in a press release that he was separated from the department pending disciplinary actions and that he resigned just prior to his termination. How many times have we heard that? At one time, it's alleged that he had used another officer's badge number and wrote a false citation to a female student, and per the reports cited by local newspapers, allegedly attempted to then hook up with her in exchange for dismissing that ticket. That wasn't even valid in the first place because he was no longer a cop. What he had done is he had kept some old ticket books as well as a police radio. Now, he's no longer a cop, but he never turned it in. I would call that theft. He has been extradited. He actually went to court. And smartly, very smartly, the judge denied him any bail, any bond, and called him a flight risk. You think? When the guy had a warrant out, he ran in excess speeds of over 100 miles an hour from his Blue Line brothers trying to get away. You don't think he's a flight risk? But his attorney said, "Oh man, my client deserves bond. He deserves bail. He's not a flight risk. This whole thing's a misunderstanding. This whole incident was self-defense." Yeah, right. You're an accused stalker. You won't leave the kid alone. You put air tags on his vehicle. You pace in front of his residence at weird hours. You're accused of installing a Ring doorbell on a vacant building nearby to spy on this man. And you're going to claim self-defense? You're crazy. Crazy. You deserve to be in prison the rest of your life. No death penalty. I hope not. He deserves to rot in a prison cell for the rest of his natural life. And then, in his unfortunate passing, I think they should store the body there in the jail, in the prison, for another 20 years and let it rot. So here's some news clips about this story. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks again for watching the Junkyard News. Maybe, who knows, we might see you in the next video.
It was an emotional day for Carlos Collins' family in Jackson Municipal Court. They had to sit and face the person accused of gruesomely shooting and killing their loved one. They admit that this is only the first step in getting justice for Carlos. 25-year-old Carlos Collins.
If you do the crime, you should have on a jumpsuit.
Filled with lots of emotions both inside and outside the courtroom, Carlos Collins' mother, Alisha Hudson, and her family did not hold back. C. Marcus Johnson is accused of murder and shooting into an occupied dwelling that left the 25-year-old nurse dead at the Tapestry Northridge Apartments on Parkway Drive. Judge June Hardwick denied bond for Johnson in municipal court Friday after considering all the facts. She says he's considered a flight risk. Johnson's attorney on hand clapping back, saying not so fast. He said his client does deserve bond because the entire incident was in self-defense.
By him saying that he was wanted it to be considered self-defense. You had no business up there. And anybody that's helping you and aiding and abetting you, you all are guilty too.
Detectives inside the courtroom revealed an axe was involved in the gruesome attack on Collins. The incident was captured on his Ring surveillance camera. Also learning that Johnson is no stranger to the judicial system. Several misdemeanor charges were brought up against Johnson. They included making annoying phone calls to an individual back in 2018 and stealing an iPad from a church back in 2022 while working security. 2 felony charges in Ridgeland from 2009 were also revealed, one being in possession of burglary tools and the other on false pretense. Johnson was never convicted of those crimes. Even though Johnson is behind bars, Hudson believes Johnson's ties to JPD will not work in her son's favor for getting justice.
My son will not get a fair trial here in Jackson, Mississippi, and I really want his body moved from the Mississippi, period. Nothing here is being done correctly.
Other relatives are hopeful that the wheels of justice will turn in this case.
And we want justice for Carlos. Yes. That's what we want. And a lot of things are going to be revealed. Don't think it's over now.
Now Johnson will remain behind bars until his court hearing in the future.